Welcome to Inspired Artist Podcast with me, Porter Singer. I have the pleasure of speaking to a fellow podcaster today. She is the host of MYA My Yoga audio. I was just on her podcast and now she gets to be on mine. So we're doing a little fun podcast switch. So Megan Morgan is a yoga teacher, writer, artist, and mom to two daughters, and she's been practicing yoga for over 20 years. She actually contacted me after I was on her podcast, and this was something that really intrigued me. She has published a book called The End of Me in 2019 that is an autobiographical memoir about the 3 times she has died, what she saw, and what she learned. So I'm assuming we will talk at length about that because that sounds very, very intriguing. Megan graduated from the University of Toronto in 2009 with a degree in art and art history. She moved to San Francisco, where she completed her MFA in photography at the San Francisco Art Institute in 2012, and then a year later, she moved to California full-time. In 2020, she launched the podcast MYA My Yoga audio to bring audio-only yoga practice, meditation, creativity, and wellness-oriented interviews to listeners all over the world. All right, well, let's get into this podcast, Megan. Here we go. All right, we did it.
Oh, it's technology.
Thank you. Yeah, I have an excuse. It's a good one. I am doing this new practice called soul attunement. Have you heard of this? soulattunement.org. And I was not expecting it to just be this wiping me out, but it's like a 5-minute practice that you do in the morning. You don't hear anything. You're supposedly receiving downloads from this soul collective. And I feel myself vibrating through this practice of 5 minutes of complete silence. It's really trippy. And then I noticed yesterday I got super dehydrated because they tell you to drink a lot of water, which I didn't listen to. So definitely if you're going to go do that, drink a lot of water. And then today I'm just feeling super tired. So a lot of cleansing is happening and they do warn you about that. But I wasn't really prepared for that given 5 minutes of silence. So.
I'm intrigued. I'm going to be looking that up after this.
Well, maybe you've experienced something similar. I mean, or I don't know, a similar sort of vibrational, shift, being that you have died 3 times. That's probably a little bit more intense than what I'm experiencing. At least the integration of it. I'm assuming the dying part is not the difficult part. We'll talk about it.
Would say that's accurate.
Can you, I mean, I really don't know how to ask you questions about a death experience. And you call it a death experience. You don't call it a near-death experience because it was death, right?
I realize that the term is NDE, near-death experience, and I knew nothing about them beforehand. And I started researching it many years later, 20 years later. It was kind of a secret for a long time. I just told very close friends and family because it's an odd thing to experience. And they were 3 completely separate types of incidences. I spoke publicly about it once and people came up to me afterwards and said, do you have a heart condition? Do you have something that predisposes your heart to stop? I said, no, it was 3 totally different times in my life, 3 totally different incidences. And I didn't realize actually how common it was until I started researching it. And I want to say it was in 2018 or 2020, there was more than 8 million incidences of recorded NDEs through this institute of Americans alone. Just Americans. It wasn't even worldwide.
Wait, give me that number one more time.
8 million.
Holy moly. Okay. I wasn't prepared for that.
No, I read this other book so this is a funny story. For anyone listening who is more curious about this, there is my book. But when I approached the editor that I hired to help me edit the book in 2016, we worked on it for a couple of years. she asked me if I'd ever heard of Anita Moorjani. And I said, no, I haven't. She said, you have to read that book. It's called Dying to Be Me. I was like, oh,
Ooh,
that
that's a
sounds
great title.
great. Who's been through it. She had like end stage cancer and you know, went through the whole bit and then wrote her book about it. I kid you not, so that was like a Friday. It was either Saturday or Sunday of that same weekend. I actually went, it was a local thrift store. So I was donating some clothes to the local thrift store, brought them in. Then I'm like, oh, I'm going to go in and look at the books. I walk in and like the first book I saw was Anita Moorjani's Dying to Be Me. And so I'm like, okay, this is like a sign. And so I'd already written like a half, a quarter at least, or a third of the book, of my own book. So I'm like, this feels like a sign. So I bought it, completely tore through it. It's fantastic. She gets like quoted and talked about everywhere. So I was like, okay, like I just felt more confident going forward with my own story, having written. She mentions this institute, which I can't remember in this moment, where she found out the same thing, that this experience is actually way more remarkably common than we might think. People just don't talk about it a ton because they don't want to be perceived as having mental illness, or you know what I mean, like whatever.
Oh, that kind of makes me mad.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, like, oh, that, yeah, wow. But I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess if, yeah, it's a kind of a vicious circle. If nobody's talking about it, then it seems weird, and so nobody talks about it. So it seems, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of perpetuates the whole thing. Or people who just say it's like it's religious, right? Or
Uh,
say it's just biological. It's just your brain like giving you that everybody sees similar things because the brain is doing these certain things. I don't think anybody knows definitively for sure. But
right.
there is a commonality amongst all experiencers of coming back and completely taking out a new lease on life and being
Mm.
like, well, I see things totally differently now. Most experiences are overwhelmingly positive. I found a podcast a couple of years ago where they interviewed people who had negative experiences and felt like they went to a version of quote unquote hell or
Oh.
purgatory or whatever you want to call it. But most users don't have that. But that was a whole new thing for me. I didn't really want to stay in that place of researching that because that wasn't my experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the first instant, and I go into like great detail in the book, but in the first experience, I was in my very early 20s and I was swimming in Lake Huron. I'm from, actually, I'm from everywhere, but this was in Canada. I spent most of my life in Canada. And so could see the United States. I could see Michigan from where we were, and I was swimming in Lake Huron on a very rough lake day and was overwhelmed by the water. And I'm a pretty good swimmer, but I just got overtaken by a wave and slammed into like a metal barrier
Oh,
and
wow.
consciousness. But from that moment, like from hitting the metal barrier and sinking down to the bottom of the lake, it was like I'm just looking up through the water and can see the sun. And the sun turned into like a brighter light. And a lot of experiencers talk about that, seeing this bright light at the end of the tunnel. It's almost like a cliche, but that's what happened. And I mean, I was 19. I have to think back now. Yeah, I was still a teenager technically, rising towards the top of the water and thinking, oh, I'm just like floating up, but I wasn't. And just went on to have this completely bizarre experience. So my biological parents died when I was little. My mom was killed in a car accident when I was 7 months old. And then my
Oh.
dad died of a heart attack at the Toronto airport when I was 4. And so in between those times, I remember my dad a little bit. I don't remember my mom at all. In between those times, he would come up to visit, but I stayed with my maternal grandparents in Canada who eventually adopted me.
Oh, okay.
And so when I'm like going up through this tunnel, and then suddenly my mother appears, but it's
Oh.
like not my mother how I remember her, because I don't remember her, but from pictures. So she was like in her wedding dress and she's
Mm.
in the water and she's floating out, and she was like kind of mad. It was like, you're not supposed to be here. You need to like, and I'm like, I'm caught up in the moment of like wanting to connect with her, right? Would be like, mom, literally it was kind of sad. But then beyond her, I could see, that's funny because I could see your background, like your folding screen of your room there. And it was a lot like that. It was kind of just this beautiful wooded area, and you could hear like plates tinkling and forks and knives and people talking and laughing. And I could see relatives like who had already passed on. And it just took a second for it to sink in that everybody I was looking at was people who were no longer alive because they were having a great time. And so I was like, I want to go to that. I want to be with those people. I want to be with you. And so I started arguing with my mom.
Oh, this is sort of like a funny teenage experience, actually.
Absolutely. She was just like, oh, and like physically prevented me from going forward. I was so mad, even talking about it, mad again. But like, and then it's hard to describe it. I came back and it was like, again, I'm like rising suddenly very quickly to the surface of the lake. And my boyfriend at the time had caught up to me, like carried me to the beach. But I'm like watching this from the sky. I'm like not in my body. I'm watching it from above. And he's doing things to try to like make me breathe. And so it's like a flip flop between being in my body and watching from above. But then when the water comes out, like the water that was in my lungs, and it was awful feeling and sensation. Is just like the throwing up feeling is never a great feeling, I don't think, in anybody's body. But then after that water came out, you think, oh, it's relief, right? You're gonna feel air. And it felt awful. It was like pain body. So that's when I realized, oh, when I'm in this other place, I don't feel any pain. I don't feel no suffering. And here's all these great people, this beautiful landscape. That's where I want to be. It was so difficult. And anyway, he was like, when I started, kind of mumbling hysterically about what had happened, he was like, okay, you just had a rough experience, but we're not talking about this. We're talking crazy talk. And I literally didn't say anything for years because it was just this like, I didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know who to talk to about it, and kind of left it. And the second experience.
Well, can I ask you about that one first? Do you, because you've gone through several at this point, and I'm sure you've had time to integrate like you didn't at that point. Do you feel like it was actually your mother that prevented you, or it just wasn't your time to die and you had to kind of like, there had to be a character that was gonna send you back?
That's a good point. You're probably right because based on what happened next, sorry. Yeah, that somebody had to be there to like interrupt and let me know. And I had a complete stranger once, who obviously was very in tune. I would say psychic, using quotation marks. Complete stranger in a mall that I just happened to be talking to. And he said he just like out of the blue said, and it wasn't about this experience, it was about the second experience. They sent somebody that you would know and recognize and listen to, because when you're in that space, you're just so overwhelmed with the magnetic pull of what that feels like, that pain-free body, that you're not going to listen to any reason unless there's somebody really significant there telling you to hold up. So whether it was actually my mother, I'm choosing to believe that, but I'm also
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be both too. Like it could actually have been her and she just knew to play that role, or,
mm-hmm.
I mean, it definitely was actually her. She's actually, I don't know. That's my opinion. That's my strong opinion.
It's like my only memory, so it's like the one that I hold on to. But I recognize that's an emotional limitation, right? But that, if there's guides or angels or whatever out there, they're gonna send somebody you're the most likely to respond to, and that you're gonna see and try to make sense of, and be able to integrate it a little better than somebody you've never seen before in your life. Like they say today, I love that, but they say that you never see anyone in your dreams that you've never seen or known in real life. But I have dreams often where I'll see people. I'm like, I don't, but ever since I learned that, I'm like, is it just someone I saw on the street one day? And then somehow they're in my dream and I don't know who they are. Just
That
like you're.
surprises me because
Mhm,
I don't feel like I recognize the faces. It's usually like a familiar feeling of a person, but I don't usually, yeah, they never look like they're supposed to. But maybe that also comes from like living multiple lives and knowing people as looking different ways.
mhm. Yep, I believe that too.
Wow, that's cool. Okay, so
Like,
second. Oh, unless you had something else you were about to say.
oh, it's like the multiple lives thing, but I I believe in that too, and in the sense, especially like you meet people and you feel like you've known them your whole life, and then there's a few people where I'm like, I know, like I
Mm.
absolutely know that I've known them before this time, and I don't know how I know that, but I'll have a dream or like a meditation, something that's like it's not from this time, it's like older time, and it just feels so familiar, and you can even just accept it as that, like this
Mm.
person feels so familiar and I've known them before, and we're meant to finish something out in this lifetime, and it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But I do truly believe that, just because I feel like there's people that you meet sometimes. And it's like my current part, my husband. We've been together for 27 years married, but we were together 3 years, like 30 years.
Ah.
And it was instant knowing, like on both of our parts. And we didn't talk about it in those terms at all until maybe the last 10 years. But it's because we've lived more time alive with each other now than we did before we met. And I think your intuition gets stronger the older you get and the more you get to know people. But I felt that with friends too, like women friends that I've met over the years, total stranger, and I go and I meet them at an event and we'll just look at one another and say like, I know you from somewhere. That's impossible because I just moved here from Canada, I just moved here from LA, we have no connection, but like we do, and we're like, we're not going to get bungled up in what that means, just that we're friends, and it's a good thing. And I feel that way about you as
Yeah.
well. It's
Yeah.
being your second conversation, really, but I feel this connection to you, um, and that we were meant to meet. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I totally believe that. I feel sometimes like there are themes when in terms of people, like you meet the same kind of there's like a certain type of person that comes and plays like a similar role at like different stages of your life too. Do you have that?
there was one of your podcast episodes, I think it was yours, where you were interviewing somebody, and you go into a setting and you choose people to be on your team, and then it's like one person plays your metaphorical.
Oh, Nina. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Family constellations.
Yes,
Yeah, it's a
that was
therapy practice.
so cool. And I have heard of that. I've not participated in it, but I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. I feel like that would be really mind opening, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't either. But yeah, it does sound cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, second one.
The second, so we were living in Calgary, Alberta, which is 30 minutes outside of Banff, the Rocky Mountains, and
I actually have a friend who is from Calgary, but I've never been, but I'm familiar.
so great. So great. We lived there for 5 years. And so we had our first daughter by then. So my second daughter was being born. And things happened very quickly. It was like 2 weeks, 3 weeks actually, almost before her due date. And I kind of knew my first daughter was born very quickly, 6 hours for a first birth.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, something's happening. We got to call the doula. She was like, okay, I'm on my way over, just get in the bathtub and like, we'll get things moving. We had planned to have a hospital birth. I wanted to give birth at home. Um, she got stuck if the timing was, she got stuck in rush hour. She's like, I'm not sure I'm going to be there. And I'm like, baby's coming right now. So long story short, she was born in 45 minutes at home. Um,
45 minutes.
yeah, that was a
Whoa.
very, very quick transition. So she made it in the door right as as she was making her way out. So we got to that moment, and I'm guessing biologically, because things happen so fast, I started hemorrhaging, and I knew it. I could feel that something was really wrong, and I kept saying, I can't breathe, I'm cold. They had me in like boiling hot water in the shower, and I'm like, I can't breathe. So anyway, get out of the shower, and they were trying to help me out, and everything just like went black. So from my point of view, we're stepping out of the restroom, everything goes black, and when I open my eyes, I'm in a hospital on a gurney, and people are rushing by, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense, like that kind of blah, blah, blah. And my dad, who, as you know now, died when I was 4, shows up, and he was literally like like what 1970s dad, like cool dads on TV look like. And he had like a leather jacket on and a turtleneck and like a big afro. And same thing. He's like, you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing here? And he's like all frantic. And I'm like, Dad, I'm talking. And I'm like, you have another granddaughter, and da 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 da, trying to connect with him. And he's like, stay here. And I'm like, I can't, I'm on the journey, like I can't go anywhere. And he runs down the hall, and he brings back this whole team of, it was so loud, he brings this whole team of doctors, and he's like, you got to send her back, you got to send her back. And they all start working on me. And again, I was mad. I'm arguing with him, saying, let me just talk to you for a second. This is what's happening. He's like, you're not supposed to be here, you have to go back. And next thing I know, I wake up, I can like feel chest compressions being done, but I'm looking at myself from above. And so I can see our doula, Kimberly, and my husband like over me on the bed in our bedroom. And I'm like, well, that's weird, because like I couldn't feel any pain really. And again, in this place where I should be in pain, but I don't really feel the pain, but I could see them working on me. It was sort of interesting. And then I'm back in my body, and I open my eyes, and my husband's a beautiful shade of brown, but he was like a shade of green on the wall. And he was slapping my face, not in like violence, but just and I can see the doula is like doing the chest and it's so bizarre.
So you're not actually at the hospital, you're still at the house. Okay.
And she was like, okay, her eyes are open. It was so disjointed. And anyway, when breath came back into my body, I don't remember if I put this in the book or not, it felt like swallowing glass. Like the pain of taking breath was like, it was awful. But anyway, everybody was very relieved. I was very confused. And they're like, you need to go to the hospital, because your heart stopped, and like this is everybody was kind of in a panic. And I was just like, absolutely not. Like, I'm so terrified right now. This happened, and I probably should have listened to reason, but I didn't. I just wanted to be home. I was just like, I've just been through this thing, and the very last thing I want to do is go to a hospital. Like, if I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go. And that was truly bizarre. It was quicker. It was a quicker trip than the first incident. And yeah, again with my dad, and like it was like Shaq. He kind of looked like Shaq. His dress, he looked super cool. I was very concerned, and and so that's when Jesha was born. And then
so are you going to move on to your third, because I have some questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you feel, I mean, that I think that was super cool that you like knew exactly what you wanted to do afterwards, but I'm also wondering if like you'd had this experience before, and now you had not the same, but like a similar experience. Like, I mean, how much credit are you really going to give like a medical team at this point? Like, was that part of it? Like, I just died. What are you going to do?
There's nothing. It's amazing how people respond, because even afterwards we had trouble registering her birth, because they're like, it's automatic on the form. What hospital was she born at? Well, she wasn't.
Oh, is that a Canadian thing? Maybe. I think in the US it's not that hard.
They were just like, what do you mean she wasn't born in a hospital? Well, a doctor had to be presenting. So my doctor actually I was so lucky. My doctor did come to the house because she knew, like she knew the doula. She was the one who had recommended her to me. So she knew she would have to come to the house to provide that signature, but I wouldn't have known that. Like I had the plan was to have the hospital birth, right? It's just not how we couldn't have made it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and you can't be the only one. I'm sure they've
Oh,
been
exactly.
through this. Yeah.
But it's interesting how it really put a spin in things, and they're like, well, did you plan this? And, and they like accusing you, right? And I'm like,
Oh my
no.
gosh, really?
Yeah.
Was that like days later, or was that the same day that all this just happened?
I was like 2 weeks later.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He's not even gonna. We didn't even have her car seat. Nothing. But it was like because she was so early, and at 9 pounds. Thank God she was early.
Whoa.
So we're tall. Like I'm 5'11".
Okay.
My husband's he's the same height actually,
Okay.
and so we've never had like teeny tiny babies, but the second one was bigger than the first. So we couldn't even have brought her home from the hospital because we didn't have the correct legal car seat to bring her home at the time. But anyway, what were your other questions?
No, I think that was pretty much it. I was wondering about the just because I think when we experience spiritual things, or when we experience like the healing of something that's not due to like a medicine, but it's due to like, I don't know, different food or affirmations or whatever, it does give kind of a different you have kind of a different relationship to the medical community. Not that you don't ever want to use them, but that there's limitation. You understand that there's limitation there, and that
How powerful you are. Like when my doctor actually showed up, I guess I can say it now because it's 25 years later. But like for all intents and I'm not saying her name, but for all intents and purposes, she showed up after the birth. But really, she got there at the same time as the doula. But the doula helped do the birth because of the legal requirements. But I remember her saying to me, and at that time, there was like this massive flooding going on in like, I want to say it was like Eastern Africa. And there was this story that had gone viral at the time. So yeah, it was the year 2000, of this woman who'd been trapped in a tree while these floods were going on, and she went into labor and gave birth by herself in a tree with a raging flood below her. And I remember the doctor looking at me, and she's like, if a woman can a flood in monsoon season and wherever it was, like you can do this too. And I was just like, yeah, like how powerful that is. Embrace the strength of your body. So I was like, oh, I'll always remember that moment. And the other thing that was interesting leading up to this, both my daughter's names, I dreamt them before they were born. But in this case,
my name was dreamt.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, you know that? Yeah, I totally said that on my podcast.
I love it. So see, we're connected there again. Yeah. And the second instance, I also dreamt the circumstances of her birth, which turned out to be true. So I dreamt I was reading a newspaper, and I see this picture of a baby that did look like her when she was born. And it said her name. Like but her name could be interpreted as like male or female. So at the time I didn't know what that meant. And but the circumstances of her birth were also that she was born with the cord around her neck, and it was kind of this tense thing. It didn't say she was born at home, but it said, and that's actually what happened. So when she first came out, and it was like, even 45 minutes was fast. It was not progressive. And they were like, oh, there's a cord there. We just need to like unhook that and go around. And I'm like, oh, I totally dreamt that this was gonna happen.
Oh, neat.
Sometimes we know these things. So it was like there was this death experience, and my poor husband, I think he was just terrified, right? That if I actually did go, he's going to be without me, left with a newborn and a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
It was super scary for him, which I acknowledge now. At the time, I couldn't because I was so wrapped up in what happened. But
yeah. So did you tell him about the experience? Did he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He like understood, or he believed you? Yeah.
He was just like, thank you for not staying there. And I was like, well, My dad is not going to let me. So yeah, yeah, it was time to go. And both of them had like, a few words. They were just like, it's not just that you have to go back, but it was like, you have a life to live. You have children to raise.
Oh.
You have to do. And I used to think it was like, oh, there's just some big, like, overarching, super important thing that I have to do. And I'm less convinced of that now. And it's more just like the little ways that our lives make a difference for other people, and like how we can teach and how we can continue to learn and grow and evolve, like, communally.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm not going to let you minimize that, actually. I don't think that what you do is small. Yeah, I don't, I've been thinking about this. It's like, you can't quantify how, because you touch people, you're connecting with people when they listen to your podcast, and when you teach a class, or even at your work, or with your daughters, or like that's hugely impactful. Like, or I don't know, or I think we have this kind of distorted image of what meaning has to do because of like media now. Like, it doesn't have to be viral to be important, right?
that's a good point.
Anyway,
And
it's a little pep talk for myself too.
it's true. There's actually, what is the term she used? Shannon Thompson. I interviewed her. She's the head of Shakti Rising, which is a nonprofit organization that I volunteer with sometimes. And she came on, and one of the questions I had asked her, like, who are some of your like famous, infamous, non-famous mentors? Like, who do people need to learn from? And she went off onto this whole thing, and she's like, I would argue we need to hear more about the people who are not going viral, who are not always in the headlines, because people are doing such important work every day, and like that gets minimized in light of like what you were just saying. It doesn't have to be a viral moment to be important. So
Oh, that just made me think too of like just what we focus on in general, because when we like what we make big, like what is news is like all like the minuscule crappy stuff that's happening in like these select places around the world. And there's so much good stuff happening everywhere that's like not worthy, in air quotes, of being reported. Like, we were watching this really cute show with Eugene Levy called The Reluctant Traveler. Have you seen this?
no,
It's
but I did.
really cute. But the second episode takes place in Costa Rica, and he just happens to mention this fact, and I was like, "What? Why haven't I heard this before?" It's like they've reforested like 5 million trees in Costa Rica in the past 10 years or something. I mean, something like that. But like that's a big deal. That's newsworthy.
No, because everywhere else is like burning and flooding and like,
Yeah, but I feel like there's like stuff being done about these things that we don't hear about. So you always hear of like it's awful, but like, yeah, there's like people are doing stuff.
what sells the stories, right? It's
Yeah.
always the negative news bias, which
Yeah.
is so hard to swallow.
Oh, we went down a rabbit hole with that. Yeah, okay. So so third one.
The third one, and this one was probably the most the strangest one of all. So the girls were in, my eldest was in school, was in kindergarten. The youngest was still in like day home care because she was still a toddler. I drove them to school and daycare, and I'm on my way to work. It's the day after my 28th birthday, and I'm driving in a snowstorm in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada, which is actually kind of a little snow belt area. Probably, trying to think for people listening, it's like 2.5 hours southeast of Toronto. And so I'm driving to work, and I had a stick-shift car that saved my life, a Subaru Forester at the time. So I'm coming down off the off ramp, and I was just shifting into third gear, and it's snowing like, I mean, you can barely see. And the car just started to like spin, like you're on that ride at the fair, it's like the half eggshell that just goes around.
Ooh,
And that's
yeah.
exactly like, so I'm like, okay, I'm on the on ramp, like, but I can't see anything. So I'm spinning, spinning, spinning. And I come to a stop, and I like look up, and I just see white everywhere. So I'm like, well, I must be on the side of the road, thank God. No, I was in the middle of the highway, and a two-tanker truck carrying milk, small things, just T-bones right into the passenger side in the middle. And so that's all. Like I look up, I'm like, oh, it's so quiet, right? Because it was so quiet. I'm on the side of the road, all's good. And it was like the grill of this truck, and the sound of that, like that's for sure a PTSD thing that I still deal with. I hate movies that do like sudden car crashes because it literally, I know it's like a gotcha moment in the movie, but it kind of takes me back to that. I have real compassion for, war vets and people who've been through those kinds of experiences, because it takes me back to that moment every time. And so, but I remember seeing the size of the girl and the speed of the truck and thinking, well, there's no way I'm living through this. Like, crazy. So
hold on, pause. In that moment, is that just sort of like an acceptance moment or like a total fear moment? Or yeah.
Initially fear, right? Because you're like, oh, but then I immediately accepted. I'm like, there's no way I can survive this. Like the girl is 2 times taller than my car. Like I'm looking up through the sunroof and I can see this girl. So, but it's fast, and so it's just roar, metal, glass, whatever, and everything went white this time actually instead of black. And I was like floating above the car, and I can see the car crumpled down. I can see the truck, and I'm like, oh, I can't. I swear to God, this is what I thought. I was like, I can't believe I ever thought snow was cold, because I'm like floating up there in the snow, and I'm like, it's so warm and it's so soft, and it's sparkly, everything's fine. I was like, okay. And then I just went through, this is another cliche, but it's so real. I went through the memory reel of life. So like every positive, amazing moment that I've ever experienced, riding my bike, marrying my husband, kissing my kids, every happy moment just like plays on a continuous loop. And I just kept floating higher and higher. And I was like, I had a moment of hesitation. I was like, well, my mom died. Does this mean that I'm going to die now and my kids aren't going to have a mom either? And then I stopped rising. Like, oh, I don't want to leave my kids. So nobody came from the outside. My parents didn't come, like another person didn't come. It was me rising to the moment and then saying, well, wait a minute. Is this where I'm really supposed to be? And then I started coming back down, and then everything did go black, and then I could hear the sound of crying, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm at my funeral. I looked outside, and I was in the car, back in the car again, and the truck driver who had hit me had gotten out and was like sobbing on the side of the road. He was like, the car was like this, and I was all crumpled up, and so he thought I was dead. And I was like, it's okay. It was just total mayhem. So he ran back to his truck. He's like, I already called 911, but like, I'm going to tell him you're not dead, because he thought I was dead. It's so strange. And then all these people stopped. Like so many people stopped. There's a woman who was like a therapist. She had this like old Volvo, and she like put the heat on that, and gave me a blanket, and she gave me a cup of tea, and I was just literally like,
wait, so like you're not even hurt, or like what was your status?
But it wasn't like anything acute. So the entire right side of my body, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. The right side of my body was totally bruised and all banged up, and I was like limping, but nothing was broken.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
The impact into the car was like basically right up to the driver's seat. So if anybody had been traveling with me, that wouldn't have been good. And then because of the impact, like my one daughter's car seat was all smashed in. So before I got out of the car, I was just sitting in the car waiting for the ambulance for a long time. And when the firefighters got there, they're like, where's your child? And because of like the head, I did have like a concussion, but nothing like gaping wound or whatever. Unbelievable, because the car spun around, flipped over, and it would have gone rolling down a hill, but there was like a cement barrier at the side of the highway. So I hit that and it stopped. But they were like, "Where's your baby?" And I'm like, and I couldn't, like in that moment, I couldn't remember the morning. So they all
Oh
started,
God.
yeah, complete terror. And then I was like, wait, no. And then I remembered bringing them to school, bringing them to the baby. It's fine. And they're like, you need to go to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
So, but the weirdest thing, well, maybe not the weirdest thing, an additional weirdness to that day, I actually had a cell phone, called my husband at work, and I got his voicemail. I don't know what I said, but he said he saved it for 6 months because he didn't know what was going on and it was clear something was very wrong. I was in hysteria. So he flew out of work and he worked in Toronto. So he was like a couple hours away in a snowstorm. So when they finished.
Wait, sorry. The voicemail you left before the accident.
No, it was after the accident.
After the accident. That's what. Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
Called him from the accident, and I don't remember what I said. I really don't. I think I was just telling him I was in an accident, but he just said you were like screaming and crying, and then like news media showed up, like crashed. I want to make a statement. I was like, I couldn't even talk. It's like no. So they cleared the accident. I actually refused to go to the hospital, so I just went home. I actually lived. Such a bad patient. I only lived about 4 blocks from that highway access point. So I was like, just drop me off at home. And they had just finished clearing my accident, and my husband was getting on the exit ramp to get off the highway, which was the same intersection where they had just cleared my accident. He got into an accident and totaled his car.
No.
News media people were there, and they featured a story on the news about a husband and wife involved in a car crash in the same intersection in the same afternoon, and we didn't even know it yet. Like, I didn't know he'd been in an accident. And so when he gets home later and he comes up the drive and I'm standing by the front door, I'm like, why are you limping? And he's like, I got an accident too. We're just like, this is nuts. But anyway, I don't know what that means, but we definitely had a good long cry, and called our insurance company, who had the nerve to ask if we had a domestic violence dispute. Like we had like crashed into each other in the same intersection, and we were like, no, like this is what happened, and we were just like, they really didn't believe us. We're like, it was on the news. You can.
I guess that's the upside for insurance purposes. Wow. Well, okay, so like the part where like you decide that you're not ready because you're the parent now was I was crying too, but like you had like your mom tell you to go back, your dad tell you to go back, and like now you were the parent and you had to be there for your kids. I know it was, oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's so strange. Each time was so similar but so different. The only thing, I guess, the consistency was being pain free. When I've talked about it, it's like it made me realize how, like, as humans, we chase these moments of joy and like having no pain. And the older I get, I'm just like, oh, like stuff hurts now. Right. But I've been acutely aware of that since my teens, because that coming back into an earthly body was associated with so much pain.
Right.
But I like the take that you just had on it about how like my mother was there parenting me, my father's there parenting me, and then me being there. I'm not sure I've thought about it in those exact terms before.
Yeah. It's nice telling your story. I mean, in the way that you're doing it, you know, it's kind of nice like revisiting things, because I think and with different people, you kind of like get new things because you're in a different place when you tell them, you know?
Yeah. It feels, I don't know if it's older and wiser, but you just learn things. Like now we're 2 months in. Yeah, January 10th, my grandmother, but who I who I grew up calling mother,
Oh.
passed away.
Oh.
Honestly, for like a month, we have a very complicated relationship, but I loved her and I know she loved me, and she did absolutely the best that she could. And she also lost her daughter, right? Who was
Yeah.
very young age, and then suddenly had this baby to take care of, and there's a lot of circumstances, but navigating her loss as like the mother figure I did know, but was also the connection to the mother I didn't know.
I'm sorry, you must have already thought about this, but it just occurred to me that your mother died in a car crash.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but you must have said that. But it's like the repetitiveness was like
Yeah,
just hit me. Okay,
that
sorry.
was the moment, right? In rising up, it was just like, so my mom dies when I'm 6 months old, and my kids are now,
Yeah.
they were like 1 and 4, I want to say, when that happened, and that's what stopped it.
Yeah.
It was,
No, no, but like the death, yeah, but like the car, like that's weird.
well, technically, she was on, my actual mother was on a moped,
Oh, I see. Okay.
but
Motor accident. Yeah.
still a
Okay.
motor vehicular
Motor
accident.
vehicle. Okay, sorry. Yes, but so she lost, yes, your maternal grandmother lost her daughter.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so just thinking about that now, I was like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. It was like almost a month after she passed, and I was reading something. I love, it's the power of words, the power of other people's experiences, power of novels. And this woman was talking about, in the novel I was reading, was talking about losing her mother and honoring her with this like sacred burial ceremony and all these things. And I'm like sobbing, like breaking down, sobbing. Rich, my husband was just like, what? So what's really happening here? And I'm like, this wonderful sacred thing happened between these two people who were so close. And I'm like, and now I'm grieving for the loss of
Mm,
for real.
mm.
Like, did I cry at the time? Yes. Did I get upset? Did like stuff happen? But then I just like, my sister-in-law also had very suddenly passed away the
Oh,
week before. So we were just
whoa.
like, it was very, it's been a lot of loss of life in early 2023.
Yeah.
And I realized I wasn't dealing with it. And so mother loss applies to whenever there's like the loss of a nurturer, or the
Mm,
loss of the person who, who was that person for you. So it's making me rethink all this all this stuff, right? Because she was
mm.
my mom. But yeah.
So, do you have a little bit more time? Because I kind of want to ask you about the integration part because we've only talked about the experiences, but like what you got out of, all of this.
It's interesting. Each experience came at a time in my life where I needed to make a big shift.
Mm,
I didn't know it at the time. And it's literally like that experience is like, wake the fuck up. Like, and in the initial instance, the person that I was with was not the person that I was supposed to be with. And it took their shutdown of my experience. Don't talk about this. This is crazy.
mm,
And I still continued to ignore that sign, right? This is not the right person for you. This person who's not accepting you and your experiences.
mm,
It took him becoming physically violent about a year later for me
mm,
to be like, oh, well, that's a clear sign. But really, the sign was there right away. And I know we all reach different levels of maturity and this and that, but I think we could, like, when people can't accept us, fundamentally for
mm,
who we it took that experience for me to like really wake up, and then a year later be able to then definitively say, actually it was less than a year later, that was summer, and it was by that following winter, so it was the next season.
wow,
And it took
wow.
one incident that got way out of hand, and I was like, oh no, bye. So I think that was a warning to get out of that relationship and
Mm,
get onto a path that was more healthful for a relationship for me. um, with the second incident, we were living in a great place, and I had both of us actually had a really good job. We had bought a house, but we were spending like all of our time working and not spending the time that I wanted to with our kids.
mm,
And so we made a move that allowed us to like spend a little bit more time with our kids, not have to commute as far, not have to spend as much time with babysitters and this. And that kind of was a little bit more of a reinforcement with the third incident as well. But after the third incident, it was like, no, you really have to fundamentally change what you're doing, where you're living. I decided to go back to school. I was like, ended up going into art school, becoming a yoga teacher, getting back in touch with what it was I really wanted to do in this life, as opposed to like, well, this is the good job that I have, so I have to just stick with it and kind of get through these times. And then from my husband, he's always been obviously very loving and supportive of me, but sort of seeing what I'm going through and supporting me and saying, we're not going to just ignore this or pretend it didn't happen. And seriously, like each time we would like move house, move city, move town, move job, like we have to, replace all the pieces. And ultimately we ended up in a place where we could be less than a half an hour from work, have our kids in minimal daycare when they were outside of school, and spend more time together because we weren't commuting for 2.5 hours twice a day.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
So you moved to San Francisco when in this story?
That would have been, hold on. Well, so after that accident, that final accident happened, we ended up moving from Calgary back to Toronto. When we moved to Toronto is when I decided to enroll in art school. That was like 4 years. Then I also did yoga teacher training kind of simultaneously with doing my master's, going back and forth. It was a part-time MFA program. So I'd spend the summers in San Francisco and part of the winter. And the rest of the year in Toronto. And then I do the yoga teacher training. So yeah, from like 2005 through 2013 was that whole period. And then yeah, in 2013, so my husband's family is actually American, and we'd long ago applied for, being able to move to the US. And weirdly, like 2 months after I graduated from SFAI, they were like, so you want to come for an interview? Like, it's been like 15 years in the making. Like it didn't happen.
Whoa. Wow.
About it the legal way is like for sure more than a decade.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But the timing was so strange, right? After graduating from school. And I don't know if it was schooling that had to do with it. I don't know. I don't know how it works. But we had the interview and I was like, okay. I started applying for jobs and found one like pretty much right away. And then teaching art and teaching yoga. And then he also started applying for jobs, and so yeah, we've been in the US ever since. It's been 10 years now.
Oh, wow. That's cool. My brother and his now wife just had to, well, they'd been going through a whole visa mess because she's Commonwealth, she's from New Zealand. So they were hanging out in Canada during the pandemic, and I mean, I guess it's bureaucratic anyway, but like everything was shut down or just very slow during the lockdowns. So they were kind of stuck there for 2 years, and yeah, they're actually back in San Francisco. They live in San Francisco.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I love you mentioned that you grew up living in France. So growing up, my grandmother's father, my great grandfather Charles, was actually from France, and so French at home sometimes, and Flemish, and then in school, of course, in Canada, you learn French too. But I've like always wanted to hear more about your time in France. Hear you talking.
Wow. So you speak French?
I do. I'm rusty, but
yeah. I mean, I grew up with it, but my proficiency sort of stopped around high school because that's when I stopped like studying with it. And yeah, but I mean, it's still a skill that I possess. My time in France, it in retrospect was so beneficial to me and what I ended up doing, but in the lived experience of it, it was not what I would call a joyful experience, mainly just because of like my family situation. It really didn't have much to do with France at all. So now I go back and I'm like, oh, so pretty, the food's so delicious, but like I wasn't noticing any of that when I was there.
It's funny how the mind works with,
Yeah.
right? It sounds, I feel like to everybody who's never been there or doesn't know it, it's like it just sounds like the most glamorous, amazing
I
thing
know. I know.
in your life. You're like, well, it's just
Yeah, I mean, no matter where you grow up, it's not vacation, right?
so we're hoping to go this year, later this summer. I've never,
Oh, cool. Do you know where you'll go?
well, yeah, probably Paris and London. That's the plan,
Okay.
just not too far apart.
Yeah.
But other than flying, I've flown through Heathrow once last year, but didn't actually see anything of all. But I
Yeah.
love traveling, love traveling when I can. And like everybody else, right? It's been on hiatus for 2 years. So, and we didn't
Yeah.
travel like with our kids. When we did travel, we would bring them with us.
Hmm.
So we did go to some places, when they were growing up, but not a ton because we'd always go, the four of us. So now that we're traveling more now as empty nesters, but we try to make it available to them as well, or help them. We genuinely enjoy spending time with our adult kids too. Like they're 22 and 25, but like they're still 2 and 5. Great, but they have their relationships, their lives, their work, their school. So I love that.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Oh, it was so fun getting to chat with you and hearing about this like amazing life experience that you've had. Wow. Do you think, is there anything else that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot, but is there anything else that would come to mind and for Liz, like just something else that you wanted to mention so you feel like you're complete about anything, any takeaways or, yeah.
So one of the things people ask me about, like when I speak about it publicly, or I will meet people in public sometimes who've read the book and they're like, "Hey,"
Oh,
and
neat. That's
they're
cool.
not famous by any, but every once in a while, just in a restaurant, right, or somebody be like, "Hey, aren't you the person who wrote?" And they'll always ask how they can find those experiences in everyday life, like
Mm,
when you go through this like life-changing experience, it's like, well, for a person who's looking to change their life, who's like not going to try to injure themselves, right, to get to the point of doing that, or be, it's kind of risky. And I emphasize that in everyday life, these things can still happen, and to really pay attention to your dreams and your sleep
mm,
space, because to me, it really feels like that same wavelength. Or when I'm doing yoga or meditating or practicing, that's the closest I can feel. Like when you were mentioning you're doing this new soul, what did you say it was called? Soul
soul attunement.
attunement. And it's that feeling, like how I felt being totally pain free, open. It's just like you can see the whole universe. It's not just your life, it's like the whole universe is
Mm,
before you too. And that can be achieved in a dream state, that can be achieved in a meditative state, that can be achieved in a flow state. So whatever that is for people, right? If you get lost in writing and creating and music and like whatever that is, where you totally lose track of time, and it could be sleep too. Um,
mm.
just to cultivate good sleep habits, because my parents will come to see me in my dreams too, and
Oh.
not very often. But when I'm like really struggling with something, and I'm just like, I just like want a mom or a dad to talk to me about this. And they'll show up, and sometimes it's them looking like them, and sometimes it's like animals. But I'll know it's them, like they'll just be
Hmm.
a sign that it's them. So yeah, looking for everyday symbolism and like finding the magic in those everyday encounters, and spending time in nature and being outdoors. I don't want to sound like a cliche, but honestly, all those things make the difference. When you're looking, the signs
Mm,
will be.
mm. Oh, I like that. Well, can you tell everyone how they can find you online and listen to your podcast and all that? And I will share the links in the podcast show notes.
Absolutely. If you are, the website for the podcast is called myyogaaudio.com. And it's literally just those three words spelled out. The podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts is MYA, so MYA, My Yoga Audio. And yeah, I think we're at 60 episodes now. I've been hosting the show since 2020. So it initially started from a dream I was just like, where am I going to practice? And I had this dream about somebody whispering in my ear what the yoga poses were, and I was going to do them. And so it initially kind of started with I'm just going to do this for myself. And then maybe other people would want to do this. And so then I started recording it as a podcast and sharing it with people. And then I had a guest on who was talking about yoga nidra, which is like another kind of form of more still meditative yoga that I'm not certified in, but this person is. And people were like, oh, can you invite more cool people on there who know great things about yoga and health and wellness? So now it's mostly interviews with really cool and interesting people who, like Porter here, could be teachers, musicians, creators, writers of all types. There's an Instagram page for it as well, my.yoga.audio. And actually it is on TikTok too, but I haven't been on it in a few weeks. It's so hard to keep up with social media. And YouTube as well. There's a Maya channel on there. And then my personal one, I will post about the podcast occasionally, but it's usually just ramblings about me and my friends and family and dogs, is Lovin' This Life, and it's at LUVIN This Life. Yeah, if you're local in Sacramento, I do like pop-up yoga events, sometimes on my own, sometimes with other practitioners. And if you follow along on any of those pages, I always post about when that's happening.
Sweet. And is there a newsletter that people can sign up for?
Oh yeah, I totally forgot.
I know the answer to that question, but
it's true. There is a monthly newsletter that I send out, and it's
a great newsletter.
All the good news we were talking about, right? There's so much good in the world. So I try to find just positive things, like something really yummy that I'm eating, something really great that I discovered, something that can help you in your life to get organized or just be inspired. I really just look more so for inspiration. Like I read something and I'm like, oh, that felt really good. Like maybe it's a photo essay or so I just kind of collect things as the month go along. What I'm reading, what I'm eating, what I'm watching. I try to profile an artist every month of some sort, because people are out here like doing commercial things, but like artists make the most money when we can support them directly. I interviewed somebody once who got a contract with Target and was like so excited, and then it was like they were getting like 8 cents or something ridiculous for every, but you go into Target, right, and you see their printed canvas. 8 cents is an exaggeration, but it was not.
Wow, okay.
It was kind of really it was really sad. Right? To think getting into a big corporation like that and selling your work. So I'm just like, okay, we just got to buy from the artist directly.
Amen. But. Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan, for doing this and for sharing your story. And thank you to y'all for listening.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast, y'all. Please like, subscribe, rate, comment, whatever the platform you listen to podcasts on offers you as a way to let its algorithm know that you're enjoying these episodes. That really helps. Also, there's some links in the podcast description notes that allow you to support the podcast in a way that benefits you and us. So please check those out. And if you'd like to stay in touch with me, you can sign up for my mailing list at portersinger.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.